All right. So, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the ACTR Teachers Lounge. Today is October 17th, Thursday, and our meeting is devoted to successful instructional strategies for linking input to output. My name is Maria Khotimsky, and it's my absolute pleasure to moderate today's Teachers Lounge. We have three very special guests joining us today, ready to share their insights and experience. William Comer, Lynne, DeBenedette, and Anna Alsufieva. I will present them in order of their presentations, and they will address various levels of instruction, with William or Bill talking about the beginner level. So William Comer is professor of Russian and director of the Russian flagship program at Portland State University. He currently serves as the president-elect of ACTR. His research focuses on reading, grammar, and vocabulary learning in Russian as a foreign language. That work led to many of the insights and innovations in the online textbook Между нами. Bill and Lynne are co-authors on the textbook, along with Anna Smyslova and Jonathan Perkins. And Bill wanted to remind us that a detailed explanation of his thoughts about input and grammar learning and learner output can be found in his chapter Reconceptualizing Grammar Instruction, Making It Meaningful and Communicative, that appeared in the 2020 edited volume, The Art of Teaching Russian. So warm welcome, Bill. We look forward to your presentation.
Oh, thank you for that introduction, and good to see so many familiar faces and to share about this. I'm going to be relatively brief, the kind of input to output, and this is going to be an example from Russian 101, so from the very beginning course, and it's kind of first semester, about week 10. That's about the conclusion of our fall quarter, and the textbook is Между нами, and we get to about, in the intensive course, episode 3.8. So one of the characters in the plot of the story is actually writing a composition about himself called Немного о себе, and it's about 142 words in length. And from this, we have two output activities that the students work on, and one is a written composition about themselves, using Josh as a model, and the other is a spoken monologue about themselves that they give without notes, but it's clearly the same material that's in this composition. So it's getting them to do it both in writing and then to kind of talk about themselves. Just for those of you who aren't familiar with the book, right, this is the kind of the input text. So it's 142 words, right? There's a bit about himself, his university studies, then the family, then there's a little paragraph about the university, then his thoughts about living in Irkutsk, and then kind of American opinions about Irkutsk. So you can see this overlaps with the output topic, mostly, but not completely, right? So that there is room for the students to do things with this and to make it their own, right? So it's not just a Mad Libs, fill in the blank, changing out Josh's name with your own. There really is some creativity that they can do with this. And I suppose the first and most important thing when thinking about input is really to make sure that they digest it, right? That it takes about 4 or 5 class hours for them to really work through the materials to make sure that they've understood the text, right? And there's really multiple activities we do to start getting at the vocabulary in the text, the language in the text, to make sure they understand what it means, which parts they can take and manipulate, and which parts they'll need to take either as wholes or just leave aside. And then, that slides right into vocabulary work, right? So ordinal numbers are new for them at this point. Also vocabulary chunks, right? So like в музыкальном ансамбле, right? Which is not something that they can come up with by themselves, right? They could see muzika, but to get that adjective for muzikальный, right? That's a big step. And then to realize that it has to be in the prepositional case, and it's an adjective, and therefore the om and the ye at the ensemble, right? So that all takes a lot of work to put together. And then at the same time, we're sliding over to work with, things that are traditionally thought of as the grammar, right? How to conjugate учиться, which is no first-year student's favorite verb, right? And then those adjective endings in the prepositional. So there's quite a bit of work to do before they come back to use this as a model for their output. And then I think the other thing that's really important with output is giving students instructions for it, right? Helping them see what it is we want them to do, right? So you're going to write a short essay about yourself, right? And then the second question here is really, sentence is really key. This essay will help match you to your host family when you study abroad, right? So we give them a purpose to their writing, and write the body of this letter and then kind of outlining the topics that should come up. So you can see this isn't exactly like Josh's letter, but very much like it, right? Plus some other things. And then also some additional instructions past that assignment, right? Some vocabulary that might be useful. Once again, directing them to things that are on the edge of their active vocabulary, but aren't completely their active vocabulary yet, so that they can personalize it without going to online translators to personalize it in ways that may be completely inappropriate or may be completely unclear. So vary your vocabulary, right? So some strategies. And once again, the warning, don't spend your time looking up a lot of unfamiliar words, right? Do not have ChatGPT translate your essay, right? Because you have a model. Use that model, use your creativity on that model. And similarly, the output instructions for speaking, right? Give a short monologue about yourself, tell what you're studying. You don't need to memorize your composition word for word, but your composition will help you say things. So the best students often take that composition and put it on note cards, right? And practice those little note cards and then come and talk to me. And I ask questions during this, so it's not entirely a monologue. Give you a little idea as to what I'm looking for in a good composition. So this is from the grading rubric, which the students do receive ahead of time, right? They receive it exactly alongside with the prompt, right? And, big categories, content and organization, 15 points, answer all's the prompts, right? Some additional information, structure into small paragraphs, right? Variety, right? Which linking words should be there, exceeds minimum length, right? Reads like a real letter of introduction. 14 points, right? Has all of those things except the reads like a real introduction, right? And then going on, things get removed from here. And then comprehensibility, does it make sense, right? And that's another reason for them, if they want all those points, to stay away from translators where they may get something that may not be comprehensible, right? Or comprehensible only to somebody who's translated back from the English or back to English. And here in the next two slides are an example of a composition that I actually did get from a student who's now far more advanced, but she does start this out like a real letter. Здравствуйте, Natalia Mikhailovna, who's another character in the book, right? Who's responsible for arranging homestays, right? So, я живу в Портленде, я думаю, что город хороший. Портленд рядом находится Калифорния, right? One of those things where they took the input and didn't quite get to meaning, right? Or we can almost get the meaning, right? But didn't go far outside of the bounds. Я учусь в Портлендском государственном, and like how we missed the word университете, don't know, but we did. Моя семья живет в Бойсе, мой отец работает в большой фирме, а моя мать в школе. Right? Very nicely formed, right? With the skipping of the second verb. And, once again, that comes from the model composition, not something that they would know to do. Моя младшая сестра учится в школе в 11 классе, она играет в волейбол. Сейчас немного о себе. Я аккуратная. Я играю на скрипке. Я люблю читать романы и слушать музыку. right? Maybe a little abrupt to have the ya akuratnaya, but once again, important thing for the homestay family to know. Um, And then я говорю по-английски, немного по-испански, я немного знаю немецкий и итальянский языки, right? And that языки, that plural there, which is not something that English speakers generally do, comes out of some of the class materials that we worked on. Я сейчас изучаю русский, period, and then there's a с уважением and the name, which I've left out here. So gives you an idea of like it's creative. It's not exactly what was written by Josh, but gives you an idea of kind of what's possible for them to do. And then the oral output is about the same, right? And I think this is, very typical sample of input to output for a beginning level course, right? Kind of what you can expect them to do and what they might do with it. And I think I made it in 10 minutes.
Wonderful, Bill. Thank you so much, first of all, for showing us the synergy between speaking and writing, but also the economy that we as teachers need to be mindful of, right? We only have so many class hours, and the text you selected and the activities that you persuasively demonstrated allow us to pack the most in a very efficient way. And we will, of course, come back to the discussion after each of the presentations. So please save your questions. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce Lynne DeBenedette. Lynne is senior lecturer, and many of you know her, of course, thanks to her amazing work in the field. Lynne is senior lecturer in Russian at Brown University. She's co-author of Между нами, which Bill mentioned in his presentation. And Lynne's research interests include curriculum design, instructional technology, processing instruction and structured input, as well as foreign language teacher education and professional development. And I would also like to refer you to Lynne's chapter, Content, Language, and Task in Advanced Russian, also in the Art of Teaching Russian edited volume from 2020. And I will put the link to Lynne's chapter in the chat. So warm welcome, Lynne.
I knew I was going to do that. Can everyone see the presentation? Yes. Okay.
Yes, thank you.
So I am dealing with intermediate level, and this is really more of an actful intermediate because we're talking about fifth semester when the students are decidedly not at the advanced level in a non-intensive program. So the context is early in fifth semester. We're talking week 4. The students coming into this class have had about 250 hours of classroom time. Very few of them have been abroad, although some of them did their second year in an intensive study program like Middlebury. We are doing, before we start working with Russian through film, which is the second half of the semester, we do a couple of biography and education topics, partly because they really, really need the review of the vocabulary, and they also need the review of how the collocations work and how some of the grammar works. So they've already described their school experience a little bit. We get out of week 3 into week 4, and I wanted a text from the internet, and I found one, Shkolniki o Shkole, and there were, at the time, this website has been taken down now, because I don't think people necessarily would feel comfortable putting their negative opinions about school up on the internet in the current climate. But an 8th grade pupil, among others, and I could choose from various colossi, I picked 8th grade because, one, there are no intensely involved sentences with participles in them. It's very highly emotive in the way that a 14-year-old would be, but it mostly sticks to fairly unslangy Russian. And so Yelizaveta, Город Москва, 8th class, writes about her school and what she hates, likes and hates about it. And there were set topics for them to deal with. The output goal was for students eventually to respond to Lisa about aspects of their own educational system that they like or hate. They had already written a more factual essay. Я училась в маленькой школе, в большой школе. У нас была У меня была хорошая учительница, ее зовут, etc. We spend 3.5 classes on this topic, so most of week 4. And I think there. This is the text format. The students get the text broken into paragraphs, and they have space on the right to write notes. And I check that to make sure that they are looking up words. They're writing them in the required form. They're required, if they look up a verb, to write both the imperfective infinitive and the perfective infinitive and give the verb дополнение. We learned the word дополнение fairly early on in 3rd year, and they're expected to do this as part of all their reading. And I also have the entire text here in case anyone wants it. You can simply copy it. I'm not going to talk about all 3 screens of the text, but I will note that there is the у всех бывают и плохие, хорошие оценки, and some comment about what parents do when students don't necessarily get good оценки. Particularly the phrase «мама считает меня ленивой». Может, так оно и есть. Then there's how she spends her evenings doing classwork and the fact that she doesn't particularly like it, and сколько времени уходит на это, and the fact that точные науки ей тяжелее даются. Next, «Не люблю» was one of the rubrics that they wrote about, and she talks about физкультура being самый часто прогуливаемый мной урок. And then also she writes about her teachers whom she does not like, particularly the one who, учительница географии, любит поговорить с учениками не по теме, рассказывает о своих взаимоотношениях с другими учителями, which is just lovely. And then in the 3rd one, she writes about the ЕГЭ and the fact that как только ты выходишь из начальной школы, ты попадаешь в ужасный мир, в котором тебя учат сдавать тесты. And that, of course, is not what she likes. Мы учимся для школы или для жизни. And this is where she has the lovely expression that you want to... Дети рождаются любознательными, а потом в школе из них делают овощей, which once the students understood, they fell absolutely in love with as an idea. And then если бы не нужно было ходить в школу was the last one. So what do? Before they, in addition to questions about whether you liked your school or not, and what was the best thing about it, which happens in class in a discussion, they also have some homework to do looking up words ahead of time that they really need to work on and know, and they have to write in verbs and дополнения. They have to find переводы, and they're allowed to use a словарь, and here's the instructions. This is just reminding them to use the blanks to fill in the дополнения. At home, they were reading the text, which is about 1,000 words, and they have 2 days to do it. And then they have a true-false English Canvas quiz, right? That's where we start. Then in class, they have a true-false quiz, but in Russian. So, Лиза считает свою мать ленивой. Это неверно would be an example of one of these sentences. Next, they work in pairs on a multiple choice activity in which they have to read and decide which of these possible completions is true according to the text. And often they have to go back into the text to check on this. And because they're talking the whole time about this, and it's very meaning attached, мать отключает дома интернет или не отключает, right? They are using that vocabulary to solve a problem, and they're using the text to go back into it and find the information. Then we have соедините начало и конец предложения. This is an activity we have lots of in между нами as well, but it works perfectly well at a more advanced level. Лиза учится в 8 классе is fairly obvious. Она считает, что у всех, they don't always immediately get бывают и хорошие, и плохие оценки. But it's a very nice sentence type, and I wanted to make sure that it was there. So that's the next kind of level of comprehension. Then we start mining the text. We go from words to phrases. So пересказывать, пересказать goes with paragraph. It's one of the things that Lisa abhors about her one of her classes. Плохая или хорошая оценка. Сдавать ЕГЭ or сдавать тест. Выпрашивать у учителя лучшую оценку. Ученикам приходится сдавать тесты. So these are phrases that I want them to get a better hold of. Then we go on to summarizing the content, and this sends them back into the text because they have to come up with answers they can share with everyone. And so they have to write them down and then say them. And then I might give some general language content and grammar corrections as we go. But this is the sort of almost the end of the comprehension work. We do have a focus on form moment, which is in this text, the two things that jumped out at me when I was looking to seize some kind of opportunity. It's not third year where you have necessarily a textbook that's going to deal with every single case, etc. But here we have the instrumental case a lot, particularly with считать, заниматься, and use of instrumental as an agent. And I wanted to make sure they went and found those things. And we also worked on если или если бы. So we identified which English sentences that are from or adjacent to the text and content would use если and which would use если бы. We also did have some translations that went back into the text. And then we spent some time observing the если бы sentences in the text to realize how they're constructed. Because it's one of those things that they were taught in second year. But over summer, it's gotten a little hazy. We put it all together with a close activity, which here the forms are given to them. We have another one they get where they're in dictionary forms. But this is their, it's getting the student closer to doing an independent summary of the text. Because if they can do this, they are almost there. And they really have to know the content to be able to do it. We do writing, but that's been prefaced by a lot of speaking in class. С чем из этого текста вы согласны? С чем не согласны? They write a short account about that, but they share it in class. And I have to be careful to structure it so that they don't get into the то что problem. We also spend time going through the text. Students pick out expressions they like. Here are some that they've liked. Естественно, comma. Если честно, такой учитель большая редкость. Сдавать тест нам приходится. Okay. Как только дети выходят из начальной школы, все время они готовятся сдавать тест. Дети рождаются любознательными, and then из них потом делают овощей was the big hit of that. And хорошая альтернатива школе was the last thing that, this was this year, but every year similar things tend to perk up their ears, sorry. And that's what they wind up writing. So they write in multiple ways. The response that they write is kind of the end of it. But they also do share some of what they wrote with other students in spoken language. And now I am done.
Lynn, thank you so much. What a fascinating text, and what a way to inspire us to look for authentic input in the best possible sense of this way. Authentic input that's geared towards our students and that allows them to learn a lot. So really thank you, and we will keep talking about this. I really loved your idea about mining the text, another good reminder of how to work with input. So we will now move on to the advanced level, and I'm happy to introduce Anna Alsufieva, who is Bill's colleague. Anna is a teaching associate professor of Russian and assistant director of the Russian flagship program at Portland State University. Anna earned her PhD in language teaching pedagogy at Kherson State Pedagogical University in Russia, and she's a specialist in Russian syntax and stylistics. She teaches advanced level Russian courses and specialized courses in the Russian flagship program, such as globalization, Russian in the major, and the senior capstone. So warm welcome to Anna.
Ой, спасибо большое за, во-первых, приглашение и как-то поделиться своими соображениями. Я, наверное, буду говорить на русском языке, и мое выступление будет отличаться от выступлений Билла и Лин, потому что я в основном покажу тексты, материал, с которым мы работаем, и будет, может быть, меньше, не то, что будет, а просто меньше примеров, что делают студенты. И я буду говорить о курсе для продвинутый, это курс продвинутого уровня, 4-5 курс Russian in a Major. Этот курс в рамках флагманской программы. И главная как цель и задача этого курса — студенты работают над, можно сказать, исследованием, курсовой работой на русском языке, и это исследование, эта работа связана с их специальностью. Наверное, как вы знаете, большинство студентов в флагманской программе, у большинства студентов есть 2 специальности, например, политология и русский язык, международные отношения, русский язык и так далее. И примеры текстов, которые вы сегодня увидите, они будут связаны с как раз такой социальной, общественной тематикой, поэтому не удивляйтесь, это будет протест, социальная идентичность, там история, Петр I, и это тоже очень важно, потому что когда мы работаем над тем, чтобы построить, чтобы студент понял, разработал какую-то тему и был способен на иностранном языке говорить на эту тему и говорить понятно, логично и доступно, и абсолютно понимая, что он говорит, то мы очень много уделяем времени на то, чтобы понять тему, и это важно. Вот о чем вообще этот текст и что нам дальше с ним делать. И вторая вещь, примеры, которые вы увидите, некоторые примеры — это работы студентов, и я собираю, как можно сказать, такую коллекцию каких-то более удачных или показательных, не обязательно удачных, но наиболее показательных текстов или примеров, чтобы от них можно было тоже оттолкнуться и работать дальше со студентами. И если так, план, о чем я хочу сказать, наверное, план можно представить так. Как вообще, то есть самая главная моя идея это... Ой, а почему он не идет? Извините, пожалуйста, почему я не могу? Вот. Это сопоставление и сравнение текстов на одну тему, но тексты имеют разные формы выражения. И разные формы выражения — это будет сейчас и жанр, и стиль. И мне кажется, это был бы мой самый главный вопрос, какой бы совет вы дали коллегам. Мой совет такой: если вы видите и находите тексты на одну тему, но тексты из разных сфер и жанров, это масс-медиа, художественная литература, это эссе, это публицистика, но это одна тема, собирайте такие тексты. Или если вы видите один автор, но это похожие темы, но разные как жанры, например, личное письмо на какую-то тему президента. Президент пишет письмо, и президент пишет какой-то указ или статью или что-то, и тоже связано с этой темой. Это тоже как интересные вещи. Но не обязательно, конечно, президент. И вот как я организовала свои слайды, можно посмотреть на работу над темой, значит, еще раз, та же самая тема, но будут разные стили, тоны, регистры. И здесь вы должны поговорить со студентами, какую терминологию вы будете использовать. Вы можете использовать слово «тон», вы можете использовать слово «регистр», вы можете использовать слово «стиль», но просто нужно как-то решить, что вы будете, когда вы будете обсуждать текст. Мы работаем с продвинутым уровнем, мы пишем курсовую работу на тему, поэтому это довольно такая сложная вещь. И первое, с чего мы начинаем, мы смотрим с с макроуровня, это как вообще организовать содержание, то есть композиция. Итак, вы видите здесь первый вариант, оригинал, это то, что написал студент. И потом постепенно, конечно, вот второй вариант, окончательный вариант, мы к нему пришли. Не то, что я его сразу показала студентам, но сейчас я могу работать с этим вторым вариантом и, например, как с этим работать. Студенты, вы можете сразу показать студентам два варианта. Вы можете обсудить, какая разница, в чем разница. Вы можете начать с этого, с уже отредактированного варианта. И здесь как примеры заданий. Заданий вы можете менять. Ну, например, мы обычно смотрим, как можно разделить текст на части, как можно заглавить эти части, почему они идут в таком порядке и так далее, как его можно сократить, как его можно перефразировать. Вернитесь после того, как вы поработали там с партнером, например, и перефразировали этот текст, вы можете вернуться к этому первому тексту и еще раз подумать, что изменилось и почему. А следующий, с такого как бы макроуровня, спускаемся на микроуровень. Это морфология и синтаксис, и, как, наверное, вы все прекрасно представляете, одна из очень важных черт, характеристик именно книжного текста и такого текста с тенденцией как бы научного стиля, это доминирование существительных. Существительных будет очень много, и большинство этих существительных будут отглагольные существительные. И, например, с этими заданиями, вот как вы здесь видите, это то, что студенты получают распечатки. Вот в начале нашего курса, на прошлой неделе, например, мы работали. Да, вы прочитаете тексты в группе 1. Ни хуже, ни лучше. Ни тот, ни другой. То есть сейчас мы не говорим ни о качестве, ни о композиции, а именно как о качестве, но о другом качестве. И смотрим, и начинаем, это как бы первый наш подход, потому что дальше в течение всего курса мы будем довольно регулярно делать такие вещи, перефразировать, изменить, повысить тон или стиль, или наоборот снизить и сделать более нейтральным. И потом мы работаем, например, да, вот группа 2. Здесь вы уже увидите, например, текст 3 – это текст, написанный студентом, и текст 4 отредактированный. Мы опять вот через эти небольшие маленькие фрагменты, например, я могу ввести или тон текста определение, или стиль, или регистр, или что-то такое. То есть очень много наблюдения, и мы все это обсуждаем на русском языке вместе, так далее. Еще один пример морфологии и синтаксис перед вами. Например, текст 1, это автор, Heritage Speaker Russian, и текст о Петре Первом, и потом текст после работы редактора. Редактором была не я, но все равно был как носитель языка, и мы, опять же, можем на дом, обычно это задание студенты делают дома, после вот того, как мы обсудили на занятии вот эти примеры, домашнее задание, вот работа с этими текстами, и мы смотрим на текст 2, и вопрос стоит, чем отличается текст 2 от оригинала, то есть что вообще здесь изменилось. И вы, конечно, увидите, да, здесь Петр Великий, там он посылал, он ввел, он заменил, то есть у нас везде будет такой субъект, и если вы посмотрите на другой текст, то вы уже увидите система образования, смотрите, да, порядок слов заняла определенное место, нерелигиозное образование стало, были отправлены, было введено, то есть совершенно даже меняется порядок слов, и опять же, это мы делаем в начале курса, вот сейчас осенью, но как бы уже я начинаю ориентировать студентов, готовить их к тому, что они будут читать тексты на русском языке, связанные с их специальностью. Так, и последний, как бы такой, опять поднимаемся на макроуровень, теперь уже что-то связанное, так скажем, больше с дискурсом, когда смотрим именно на стиль или вот регистр, и в терминологиях, так как в американской терминологии прикладной лингвистики, и жанр. И перед вами два текста. Это аутентичные тексты, и, конечно, это сразу это можно даже сделать с английским языком. Эффект будет абсолютно точно такой же. У нас будет СМИ, это будет совершенно одна структура. И у меня есть текст на английском языке о скейтбординге как спорте. И тоже есть статья на английском языке, анализ как скейтбординга. И студенты, конечно, совершенно сразу видят короткие предложения. Каждое предложение – это факт, интервал, даже как это представлено. И опять же мы смотрим на русское предложение, и здесь вот это... Ой, извините, почему-то я не могу ничего делать на экране. Вот до точки это одно, и вот от слова «так» до «то есть» это все одно длинное предложение. И примеры вы видите, да, то есть здесь вы, задания, какие задания мы обсуждаем, вы можете прочитать, да, то есть я не говорю студентам, откуда эти тексты, они должны сами определить и как-то объяснить. Вот. И самый, как бы еще из этой же, из этой же области тип задания, теперь у нас аудио. Это видеолекция, лекции все доступны в YouTube, а социальная и гражданская идентичность. Лекция специально написана и записана для студентов. Вообще она находилась «Верные слова» на веб-сайте «Верные слова», созданные, разработанные Высшей школой экономики для иностранцев. Лекция 9 минут. И Гулевич, профессор Гулевич, вот она рассказывает так, как бы читалась лекция российским студентам. И потом я нашла учебник, именно она же автор, и в учебнике есть часть, которая прямо соотносится с тем, о чем идет речь в лекции. И студенты получают, опять же, задания. Здесь вы можете сами составить, какие хотите вопросы по содержанию, по перефразированию, по переводу, все, что вот мы обычно это делаем. Потом мы можем сравнить, вот как эту минуту человек объясняет, лектор объясняет понятие, потом мы можем посмотреть, как написано тем же самым автором, написан комментарий в учебнике, и, пожалуйста, мы можем предложить, как мы можем это объяснить, и хотите добавить варианты, можно добавить, как мы это объясним одноклассникам, старшеклассникам, как мы это объясним в какой-то неформальной ситуации. Вот на этом я заканчиваю. Все, спасибо.
Анна, спасибо огромное, прекрасные примеры. Опять-таки, напоминание нам всем, как надо глубоко и вдумчиво работать, да, с текстами, которые мы выбираем для наших студентов. Я бы хотела открыть нашу дискуссию для всех присутствующих. Есть ли у вас вопросы, какие-то идеи, которые у вас появились по ходу, пока вы слушали презентации? Может быть, у наших докладчиков есть вопросы. И мы можем говорить на любом языке. Just to reiterate, teachers' lounges are open to both English and Russian. We invite your reflections, thoughts, ideas in response to the 3 excellent presentations you just heard. So kind of opening up to everyone. Yeah. Okay, so I see Angelina. Please go ahead, пожалуйста.
Yeah, thank you for your wonderful presentation. So I have a question to William. So you talk about students of first year, right? So who first of all write a letter of introduction, and then you mentioned that they do a self-presentation, like in speaking. And it, I guess, ties back to what Anna was talking about. So I understand it's just first year students. So, but do you introduce them to some elements of written versus spoken speech on this level? And if you do, which elements are they, and how do you do that? Do we actually need to do that on the in first year courses? So when should we start? Yeah.
I don't. The sample that they see is written language, but it's basically разговорный язык just transcribed, right? It is a model of speech, and it isn't really a written text, right? So there are some formal markers of written speech in terms that they need to have a salutation in the letter, or they'll get full points if they have a salutation and a conclusion, right? But at the very beginning level, we're teaching something that isn't very differentiated, I think, between письменная речь and устная речь. They're kind of together, And I think as they go along and can read more, it becomes clearer, right, that there is a kind of письменный стиль, right, письменная речь, which is going to be different from the устная речь. So we don't really do so much with that right at the first year level.
Thank you so much, Will. And please, Julia. Yeah.
Thank you so much. It was fascinating. And I have a question to Lynne. I absolutely loved that text that you produced for your students. It's just great to find such a wonderful text. And I'm sure I'll take it from you for sure. My question
It's online anymore. It's not there.
Yeah, well, I was just kind of looking what it is, and that's what my question is. How do you have one of the tasks that you have, я согласна, я не согласна, я согласен, не согласен. So there's a lot of negative things that this Lisa and other talks about her school, and it is not like the way that students usually, used to react
Oh, you
to
would
things.
be amazed how students talk about school. In the United States, many students complain about the school system all the time, and they don't get a way to say this in Russian. They respond to this text on a very deep emotional level, which was one of the reasons I picked it, thinking that they would love it. Because I know that if you Google now, школьники о школе, what you get is a lot of, выполняю задание и говорю исключительно положительном тоне. And that's nice. Yes, it is a way of talking about school when you are very much in a state of nostalgia about it. And yes, many Russians are nostalgic about their schools and the people they went to school with because of the friendships. But it's also true that there are a lot of problems with both educational systems here and there. And students need a way to express some of this.
So they really like it, yeah.
Oh, they love it.
Yeah, I just wondered, like, if you look at this type of like школьники о школе, you'll see a lot of texts written specifically for schools, like for their first page on the internet. And there would be «Моя школа, родная, незабываемая». So this kind of like what we call показуха. They're not necessarily sincere even. Nostalgia is just like whatever chosen to present.
Exactly.
So do you talk to students? That's kind of a difference about that because
we haven't, only because until recently it was possible to find this kind of text out there.
Okay.
It is no longer. So yes, we probably will later on in the semester circle around again and I will have them look. It just didn't happen in this particular beginning of the year.
Well, thank you so much. It's a great text. Yeah, and your exercises were great. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. I totally echo. And I think we should think outside the box and outside the textbook, right? To find things that connect emotionally to our students as well. Any other questions or responses? So, Lee, please. Yeah.
Yes, I also want to thank all presenters. It was absolutely wonderful and interesting to see. And Lynne, you're reminding me, one of the things that students are so motivated by authentic sources, and it's hard to find them. And it's not necessarily hard to find them when you're looking for things like blogs, like reactions. And so that's just a good reminder. I think often that comments that Bill made about language at the novice and intermediate level is very close to and should be close to the conversational language, and that it becomes differentiated. And I think sometimes when we're thinking about authentic sources, we are looking to things, if you look at the ACTR guidelines, you look for things like advertisements. Well, that's not conversational speech. And so to be able to use those authentic sources and use it as input and not just use it as an interpretive task, looking much more for things like that. Or sometimes there's YouTube videos of like a young student showing, what she wears to school. And that's really motivating for the students because it's a real person and it's real language and it's not so complicated yet. And so I loved that example, Lynn, as well. And you've got me Googling right now and remembering
It'll
that,
look a long time and you won't find things that are like
yeah,
this.
and now, it's more problematic. But I remember during COVID when we had much more time and we were at home, I found a lot of really cool, authentic resources. And now that I'm back in school all day long, it's just harder to find the time to look around for them. So, and I don't know if the answer is to that, because it would be wonderful if we had a way of sharing, the good things that we come up with, because we're all dealing with the same topics in beginning and intermediate level language. So it would be nice if there were a way. And I guess I could just informally say that anyone send me anything and I'll put it on the Padlet. I'll just make a category like, about your house, about your school, about your this. Like if you come up with something, send it on. And I know I'm only saying this to 15 people. But 15 people is a lot if we all find something good.
Thank you so much, Lee, for your comment. And maybe building on that, we have Ubasin. Please go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry, I just was wondering if Lynne has encountered any, so the list of the verbs are huge, right? And the meanings are different depending on the context. Do you encounter cases where some of them are not anymore like effective or used in the speech during the semester? How many of the verbs really get into their lexicon?
Well, they obviously aren't going to use every bit of vocabulary in any text that they read. Even in Anya's class, they're not going to use every single bit of vocabulary all the time, because the totality of the input and the actual used output by the student there's going to be more input than there is output, always. But that's why I have the focus on form sections, and I focus the comprehension activities to prioritize ones that I know they're going to need again.
Right. Thank you.
And I think Anya, you do the same thing. You're pushing them towards certain kinds of very important.
Yes, absolutely. So it's not that I expect them to write or say something in complex syntax. First, it's very important to notice that, to see how it's built, be able to understand the meaning, and then to try, as in my first slide where the student wrote protest, it was not complicated, but there were all the points already were there. But then how from this we can a little bit elevate, and it's not necessarily that we need to use now длинные слова. It's not about the heavy vocabulary. It's more about how you link, how you put in context, how you organize the content, how you start and how you move through your, let's say, definition or presenting something. And it's slowly, in this course, it's for years. So it's one academic year, so it's 30 hours. 30 hours. Not 30 hours. It's 30 weeks. 3 weeks, 10 weeks, 10 weeks, 10 weeks. And it's 2 hours per week we work. We not even work 3 times. It's only twice a week. But yes, but we need to show students. And in the question for reading, I suggest everyone to check short novels written by Nina Dashevskaya, and you can find audio. It's the young adults. That's the interesting genre that wasn't during Soviet time. In Soviet time, we read really сказки, простые истории, and then jump right away in 11 age to Jules Verne, the Three Musketeers, Sherlock Holmes, Conan Doyle. We all read like this. But now, this niche, young adults, it's keep very, very, very actively developed for the last 20 years in Russia. So Nina Dashevskaya, and then I have other names. I cannot just recall. they're very good stories in content and the language. You can find audio too.
Yeah, fantastic advice. And I guess I know we are short on time and Anya has to leave promptly. So maybe we will move to the closing part. Your advice, right? And Anya already shared a bit of helpful advice, but maybe why don't we make a round with all of our presenters sharing a piece of advice on finding compelling input or linking it to your class activities and to the desired output. So Anya, if you would like to add something else, I was simply amazed by how many sources and how well they speak to each other and like how productive it is to not give students the structure, but help them find it, help them analyze it. That was really inspiring. Yeah. So if you have any thoughts on that, please share.
No, I said my advice.
Yes, oh, sounds good. All right, then we pass on to
make
yes,
the collection.
yes. No, thank you so much, Anya. And then maybe
no,
or
now it's Bill or Lynne.
Bill or Lynne, please, your piece of advice for your fellow instructors. Yeah.
Well, I'm happy to go next. I think of finding texts kind of like searching for the frog that's going to turn into the prince, right? Like you kiss a lot of texts before one pops into the prince, right? You spend a lot of time with them. Sometimes you may even bring them to class one year and then you realize it's like, oh, dud, right? That 10 hours of getting ready to try using this was like misguided. But you keep on working at it to find that thing that's going to reach students, that's going to be kind of right at their level. The lack of young adult literature in Russian, right? That was a real problem, right? For finding things that are of interest and readable to students at that third, fourth year level. Right. So the fact that that genre is coming into being and is being filled, right? I think that's a great help and probably a great place to look. Yeah, but it's really hard to find texts, right? And why it took a long time before I found that Tokarova text, Din bez vranya, right? Yeah. But then when I did and I started working with it, it's like, oh yeah, now there's a reason to work with this one.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for this apt metaphor, Bill. So, and then Lynne, your advice for us. Yeah.
Well, again, I would agree with Bill entirely that it is a hit and miss kind of proposition that you don't always get a good text, especially the first time you look for one. I just happened, something about that 8th grade level spoke to me. I thought, well, this is something where they can concentrate on the ideas that she expresses without being overwhelmed by the vocabulary, right? They still have to look up words, but they're not looking at a text where they only know 30% of them. They're looking at a text where they probably know 65 to 70. It's not quite 90%, which would be, we tried to write in Между нами texts. The texts that are in there, generally students will know 90% of a text vocabulary that when they get to it. But it worked. It worked. They also do independent reading once a week, and there they are learning a different set of skills. They are reading ISMI, and they are expected to do lots of dictionary work on texts where they don't know very much of the vocabulary on different genres. And then by the second semester, they start to get to where they can do пересказ параграфа, as the 8th grader expressed it. But they can start to get more familiar with the norms of average writers in both государственное СМИ and independent SME, because they alternate reading one and the other.
Thank you so much, Lynne. So I want to, while Anya is still here, I want to take a moment to thank all three of our presenters, Anna, Bill, and Lynne, for taking precious time out of their busy schedules to meet with us today to share their insights. This meeting is being recorded, so you will have access to it, and some of our colleagues registered cannot come but do watch it in the recording. So your word reaches far and wide, and this material is also posted on the ACTR website. Here's one more link to a reader that Bill mentioned, Din bez vranya, which you can purchase and work with your students, and really lots of helpful ideas, tangible ideas, and inspiring guidelines were shared today. So we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Sorry. talking
And
too much.
yeah, so we'll linger a few minutes if anyone else has thoughts or reflections to mull over right away. But yeah.
And I just put two names, Аня Доброчасова и Нина Дашевская.
Аня,
Все.
okay.
Спасибо большое за приглашение. Было очень приятно и услышать, и увидеть всех. И всем удачи.
Спасибо огромное, да, и как бы идеи и принципы, было видно, как они взаимосвязаны, да, что значит опытные педагоги с нами говорят, да, очень здорово, да, спасибо огромное, да.
Спасибо,
Да.
да, всего доброго.
Всего доброго, да, до свидания. Да. And also, Lynn, thank you for 8th class. I almost think like our students, you know, the levels we teach, they map on certain linguistic and, you know, speech developments, which can correlate to educational levels. So that was very helpful too. Thank you.
I just want to interject really quickly that I put the link to the Padlet, the ACTR Padlet, in the chat. And I've made 2 separate sections for authentic resources for beginners or for 101, 102, I wrote, and then for intermediate students. So if anyone has authentic resources or guides that go along with them that they want to share, you could always put them on the Padlet. The Padlet will allow anyone to edit it.
Can you make sure, Lee, to put the 2 authors that Anya wrote in the chat somewhere in there?
Yes, I will. Definitely.
I'm gonna save the chat, hopefully. I think we all have an option to save the chat. Now let me see if I manage. Yeah. And thank you to all the guests for being here and for your questions too. So.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess like we didn't have time to talk on specifics, but I think what was helpful today is also to hear about the word limit and the text length and the time each of you spend with the text. I think another big takeaway is actually how much work you put into each text and how well you make it work for you. Instead of rushing to the next text, you actually, as Lynn said, mining the text and build, right? So I think
more work.
Yeah. I feel like you all like gave us a master class on like, here's your input and how much you can create with it if you work with it in a kind of well-organized and well-scaffolded way. So it was a good reminder to keep that scaffolding going. Спасибо огромное. Thank you so much. This is very inspiring. I'm like took so many notes today. So.
Lynne, could you say something about our next Teachers Lounge?
Yes, our next Teachers Lounge is actually, hold on a second. I wish I had looked up the dates. It is, don't quote me, it's Friday, right, Susan? Friday the 4th and not Thursday. And it is being inspired by the members of the K-12, ACTR K-12 Teachers Excellence Program, who have come up with the topic. I'm sorry, Susan, I wish I had been better prepared.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Who want to talk about strategies for active communication in the classroom and also for maintaining student attention. So that I can't quite remember what the title is, both at the pre-college and the post-secondary level. So what do we do to keep all students involved, to keep all students attentive? What strategies can we use to do that? And we will hopefully have lots of pre-college teachers here as well, but we're hoping that we have a good-sized post-secondary community too, just so that we can all brainstorm together the different issues we deal with and different strategies we use. And that will be coming
November 1st.
Say that again.
November 1st.
And Tommy Tabatowski, who is one of the mentors in that program, will be leading that Teachers Lounge. And that was the consensus of the current cohort of the ACTR pre-college, the K-12 Teacher Excellence Program.
Wonderful. Well, we'll already have advice from Lynn. Make them complain about school. That will get them talking. I could
hoping that it's focusing, moving from the problem to the solution.
Yes. Right, but really heartfelt thanks. Those one excellent resources, and thanks also for your presentations that our colleagues can access. Yeah, Ubasin,
Yeah, I have a very
please.
quick question. Is the code is going to be the same like the for the Zoom meeting?
The code for graduate students will be different every time. And
Every
so,
time, okay,
right, but we will respond to you right away, just like this.
Yeah, it was so quick. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Have a good one.
Nice to have you here.
Everybody.
So
Spread the
thanks again,
word.
everyone. Have a nice evening
word
or an
right.
afternoon, depending on your time zone. All right. Thank you so
Bye.
much. Thank you again. It was wonderful. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you.
We can stop the recording.
Oh, yes.
So we have me bumbling.
All right, just one
Oh,
more.
it's okay.
It's funny because we